I have worked in humanitarian intake for 11 years. I have processed consignments from 43 species across 6 sectors. I have logged medical equipment, food supplements, translator arrays, prefabricated shelter blocks, and, on one occasion, a live pair of Verrathi comfort animals that had been mislabeled as miscellaneous fauna, non-aggressive, and proceeded to disassemble the ventilation housing in Corridor 7 over the course of a single afternoon. I thought that was the most unusual consignment I would ever receive. I was wrong by a considerable margin. The humanitarian packet from the Terran Auxiliary arrived at Vel-Dara Dispatch Station on the morning of the 14th rotation, cycle Ocean Vel 7704. The manifest listed 200 units of Class B medical supply compound, 40 crates of nutrient supplement, cross-species grade, 1 portable surgical relay, and 1 unit of surplus personnel, non-specialist, humanitarian grade, designation, Van, P, Class 40 origin, Terran Auxiliary Support Branch, contract classification non-combatant. I logged her under miscellaneous personnel. The form had a field for it. I used it. The Class 40 designation gave me a moment's pause. I am thorough. I looked it up. The Ocean Continuance's Xenobiology Registry had a brief entry, a mid-tier notation, unremarkable. I noted it, filed it, and moved on. I had 40 crates of nutrient supplement to account for, and Deputy Enforcement Liaison Drask Vel's crew had been in the station for 6 hours already, which meant every corridor access log was backed up and I was working from secondary terminals. Drask Vel was not, technically, doing anything I could formally object to. The Verrathi Enforcement Liaison Office held jurisdiction over humanitarian relay stations in disputed sectors, a jurisdictional arrangement I had spent 3 years filing complaints about through the appropriate administrative channels, which had thus far produced 4 acknowledgement receipts and no resolution. His crew of 9 moved through the station in pairs. They were loud. They broke 2 wall panels in Corridor 3 that I noted in the maintenance log and did not expect to see repaired. I processed the consignment. The medical supplies went to the storage bay. The nutrient crates went to the secondary hold. The portable surgical relay went to medical. Van P was assigned Bunk 7 in the surplus personnel quarters, Corridor 2, and given a station access tag coded to non-essential areas only. The commissary, the communal wash block, the bunk corridor, and the humanitarian processing office. I gave her the tag personally, because my intake aide had called in sick, and I was alone at the desk. She was shorter than I expected. Most of the Terran Auxiliary personnel I had processed previously had been larger. The support branch contractors tended to run tall, broad, the kind of build the continuance medical assessors flagged with a second look. Van P was not that. She was compact and quiet, and she looked at the access tag I handed her, the way I look at a manifest that has a discrepancy I haven't found yet. Not worried, just noting it. Non-essential only, I told her. Sure, she said. She took the tag. She asked where the commissary was. I told her. She thanked me without apparent irony and walked in that direction. I went back to the nutrient crate count. By the time I finished my shift log at the close of the 14th rotation, I had noted the following in the station incident record. 2 wall panels damaged, Corridor 3, 1 secondary terminal offline, Docking Bay 4, cause Draskvel's crew had leaned a cargo skid against the housing. 1 complaint from the medical officer that 2 of Draskvel's crew had conducted an unannounced inspection of the surgical suite and moved the instrument trays to positions she described as actively wrong. I had not noted anything unusual about the surplus personnel bunk corridor, because at that point nothing unusual had occurred there. I went home. I live 11 minutes from the station by transit rail. It is a quiet commute. I reviewed my intake queue for the following morning, flagged 2 potential manifest discrepancies for follow-up, and went to sleep. What I was not aware of, because I was asleep, was that by the end of the 14th rotation's final hour, the first of Draskvel's crew had been located in the medical bay's instrument storage cabinet, secured with his own restraint cuffs. The medical officer found him when she went to retrieve a calibration tool. She noted in her own incident log that he was unharmed, conscious, and extremely reluctant to explain how he had arrived there. She did not call me. She called station security, who called the deputy liaison's direct channel, which went unanswered because Draskvel was not, at that hour, in a position to answer it. I learned all of this the following morning. I arrived at Vel-Dara Dispatch Station at the start of the 15th rotation. The transit rail was running 4 minutes late, which is why I came in through the secondary entrance rather than the main corridor. A detail I record only because it meant I passed through Docking Bay 3 on my way to the intake office, and Docking Bay 3 is adjacent to the cargo annex. The cargo annex door was sealed. That was not unusual. What was unusual was that the seal code on the panel was not the station's standard access code. It was a freight lock code, the kind used on external cargo containers to prevent transit shift tampering. I do not know where she obtained a freight lock code. The annex does not stock them. I stood outside the cargo annex door for a moment. Then I went to the intake office. Petra Vaughn was at my desk. She had, as far as I could reconstruct from the access log I reviewed later that morning, been at my desk for approximately 40 minutes. She had the intake terminal open. She was filling out a form. She looked up when I came in, said morning, and went back to the form. I stood in the doorway. The cargo annex is sealed, I said. She said. Deputy Liaison Draskvel's crew, I said. Freight locked, she said. From the inside, so the release is on your panel, not theirs. They're fine. A little cramped, maybe. She turned the terminal toward me. I need a countersignature on this. Apparently my arrival form never got fully processed. I looked at the form. It was the DW40-00117. Surplus personnel, non-specialist, humanitarian grade. It had been correctly filled out. More correctly, I noticed, than I had filled out the intake portion the previous morning, which I found quietly embarrassing. She had included her contract reference number, her Terran Auxiliary branch code, and a field I had left blank. Prior operational postings. The list ran to the bottom of the form. It continued on the reverse. I looked at the list for some time. I am not a xenobiology specialist. I am not a military analyst. But I have worked in humanitarian intake for 11 years, and I have processed enough personnel records to know what certain posting designations mean, and what certain campaign ribbons in a service record indicate about where a person has been and what they were doing when they were there. The Terran Auxiliary Support Branch had sent her as surplus, non-specialist, humanitarian grade. The lowest possible personnel classification on the intake form, the field you use when you are sending someone because it costs nothing to include, them and the receiving party might find them mildly useful. The way you add a spare filter to a supply crate, because there is room and it weighs nothing. I countersigned the form. Is there a food vendor on the station? She asked. The commissary was closed last night. The commissary opens at the second bell, I said. Great. She stood up, straightened her jacket, and picked up her station access tag from the corner of the desk where she had set it. I'll be out of your hair. She left. I sat down at my desk. I pulled up the incident log. I added the following notation. Cargo Annex, Corridor 4, sealed. Freight lock code, origin unregistered. Contents. Enforcement liaison crew. 9 personnel, unharmed. Released to be coordinated with Sector Océan-Vel jurisdictional oversight. See attached form DW40-0017. Countersigned. For personnel context. I paused. The form field for classification still read, non-specialist, humanitarian grade. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at the posting list on the reverse. Then I looked at the annex seal code on my station panel, which I would need to release before the end of the rotation, and which would require me to write an explanation for why 9 enforcement personnel had been freight-locked in their own annex, overnight by someone whose access tag was coded to the commissary and the wash block. I filed the form under miscellaneous. It seemed like the right category. I have worked in humanitarian intake for 11 years. I have a process for most things. I log the consignment. I verify the manifest. I assign the bunk. I countersign the form. The manifest said, 1 unit surplus personnel, non-specialist, humanitarian grade. I looked at that entry for the rest of the morning. I did not change it. I have since reviewed the Class 40 Xenobiology Registry entry 3 more times. Each time I reach the end, I sit for a moment, and then I close the file. The entry is accurate, as far as it goes. It does not go very far.